And now it's time to try some practice problems on IXL. So the first question here is asking, select the part of the passage that describes developing the hypothesis. And it gives you a hint. To develop the hypothesis, you use your prior knowledge to propose a possible explanation and to make a prediction that can be tested. So basically in this paragraph, you're trying to find a section of the passage that talks about you proposing a possible answer. Okay, so what do you think the answer is? Okay, so Brennan grew basil plants. That doesn't sound like an answer. He noticed that his basil plants did not grow many leaves. Doesn't sound like an answer. Brennan read in a book that earthworms in the soil have helped parsley grow. This made Brennan consider whether his basil plants were not growing many leaves because their soil lacked earthworms, and that his plants would grow more leaves if he added earthworms. So this sounds like a hypothesis because he's considering something, and he's trying to figure out if this consideration of the basil plants will cause the plants to grow more if he had earthworms as opposed to not. So I would pick that for developing the hypothesis. Okay. Next part, identifying the question. To identify the question, you have to pose a question that focuses on a problem. So on this part, you're just trying to figure out what are you trying to solve. So Krista pushed Melissa's and Melissa's little brother. Krista noticed that Tom always swung back. Krista asked Melissa if she thought the weight on a swing was related. To find out, Melissa stood back 4 feet and released the swing 3 times, once with a light weight, once with a medium weight, once with a heavy weight. Okay, I'm going to stop there. So right here, this part's actually talking about like data and like analyze or collecting the data effectively. So, and this is talking about how she did it, and they talked about the experiment, and that goes further on to what it is. Okay, so if we go backwards one, it says Krista asked Melissa if she thought the weight on a swing was related to the time it took to return. That's basically asking what is the question, what are you trying to solve. So that would be identifying the question. Next one, developing a hypothesis. Once again, you're trying to propose a solution. So basically, what do you think is the answer? So Heather was a DJ. I'm going to skip. She wanted to know how to make the bubbles last longer. Maybe. She read in a book that bubbles burst because the liquid makes up the bubbles evaporates. Okay. She knew that warm liquids evaporate faster than cold liquids. So Heather expected that the temperature of the bubble solution could affect how long the bubbles lasted, with colder bubbles lasting longer. So this sounds like she's trying to explain to us what exactly she thinks is going to happen. So I would go with that. Cool. Alright, one more. Identifying the question. So once again, you have to pose a question. What are you trying to solve? So Nicole grew roses. That's not a question. One day she noticed something. Not a question. She read a book about plant diseases. Also, once again, not a question. She read that allicin, a chemical in garlic, can kill bacteria. That's just information. She was curious if garlic could prevent more tumors from forming on her plants. So this sounds like a potential question. What are we trying to solve? We're trying to figure out if garlic can prevent tumors from growing. That sounds like a question to me. So I would click on that. Please be aware, I don't read the entire thing because the second half usually talks more about the experiment and the data and the conclusion. So the moment I find it, I tend to stop reading. Cool. All right. Let's try one more here, and then I'm gonna move on to the next stage. So testing the hypothesis, you need to have a series of observations and carry out an experiment. So basically, we need to figure out what exactly are they going to do, how are you going to do it. Explain their science class that objects fall at the same speed. The class want to explore that idea by dropping objects with different masses. Okay, this sounds like it potentially. Maybe. That's their question. They're trying to solve it. The students dropped 7 balls, apples, scarves, and pieces of paper out of their classroom window and recorded how long it took each object to reach the ground. So this sounds like they're testing it because this is the experiment that they're doing. You specifically know that they're dropping a certain number of balls out the classroom. So I would pick that for testing the hypothesis. Okay. Stage 2, drawing conclusions. So to To draw a conclusion, you decide if the results support the hypothesis. So in other words, whatever your question is, did you find information to support it or not? So a severe ice storm, he wondered how he could melt ice on the sidewalk. This sounds like the question. He had heard that sand when heated could melt ice. Just some stuff he's thinking about. He had 20 ice cubes that were equal in weight. So now we're getting closer to the experiment portion. He sprinkled sand on half of the ice cubes and left the other half unsanded. He placed all the cubes for 1 hour and brushed off the sand. Hansen calculated the average weight of each type of cube to see if the sanded cubes melted more than the unsanded cubes. Did a lot of experimenting. He decided that the sand did not speed up melting since the two types of cubes are similar weights. Okay, this sounds like he figured out what he decided, which is his conclusion is that he decided that doesn't seem to speed up the melting. Yeah, this is just stuff that he read, so that doesn't count. He predicted that because, yeah, that's his like what he predicted. That's what he thought would happen. So they put the hypothesis kind of at the end, which is interesting. But yeah. Next part, analyzing the data. You need to examine data and look for patterns. So basically any part where we're looking at data and it looks like they're trying to figure out what it means. Every morning Isaac watched hummingbirds. Nope. He noticed hummingbirds often drank. Nope. He wondered if the color of the feeder would influence it. Nope. Isaac hung a red feeder. You're getting closer, but nope. Every day for a week he spent an hour. This is once again just doing it. Okay. At the end of the week, he compared the average number of visits to each feeder, and he found that there were more visits to the red than to the white. So this sounds like he collected his data and then he determined that the red feeder had more visitors. So that's his analysis. That's what he determined based off of his experiment. So that would be analyzing data.